So, what do you think the vaccines are about? Was it purely a money-making exercise, or
No, the weapon. Absolutely. Sure, they make money and everything. They're really, literally, and this is the game plan. They're really trying to reduce the global population. Open about this for decades. I mean, nobody's made an issue. It's like what I've been doing has been open for decades, fighting the AIDS onionness, but people don't know about it because it's not publicized. You see, and the other thing is that the bad guys can be very open about what they want to do because they control all the media. It's not not going to get published. It's really a population reduction program globally. The global population program. It's criminal. It's murder. I have no qualms at all. I'll go in the courtroom and swear to that. And I can prove it with the evidence, their own doctor.
The best estimate by leading vaccine producers is that it could take a year or more to develop, test, and manufacture a vaccine for the clade X
virus. We have heard that 500,000 children have died. Is the price worth it? That the price, we think the price is worth it?
Richie Brown Show.
So you've had quite an incredible career been through. So if you could just give us a bit of a backdrop to yourself, how you've got to where you are, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm Dave Rasnick. I have a PhD from Georgia Tech, and I also have 2 other degrees from Georgia Tech, DS degree, one in biology, one in chemistry. And I graduated in 1978, went to a pharmaceutical industry, Abbott Laboratories. Right after that, was there for 2 years. Worked in, set up the chemistry group with another guy in the Diagnostics division. Then after 2 years, I left and started my own little company with the money guy in California, Enzyme Systems product, and we spun it off into Prototek. I worked on making drugs for tissue-destroying enzymes like cancer, arthritis, emphysema, parasites, and of course the big one was cancer. And I was in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1980. And of course, the AIDS thing started apparently, according to the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, in 1980, there maybe a little bit before. And as early as 1982, the CDC understood that what was happening to these gay men, which later was called AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Basically, they had identified correctly that it was drug use, recreational drug use, that was causing their symptoms. There was nothing new about those symptoms. That was as early as 1982.
And that was from the carcinogens, like the poppers in the gay community. And
Able and butyl nitrite inhalants and things, which are extremely toxic. I'm a chemist. I would not open a bottle of that stuff outside of a chemistry fume hood. And these guys were inhaling, they were letting evaporate milliliters of this stuff in their little dance halls that they'd go to, in places. And all of these guys would inhale this stuff, And they did this for years. And they were coming down with things like Kaposi sarcoma and a whole bunch of other things, which I didn't know any of those names or diseases in those days. I learned about them, though, during the 80s. And then the gay guys actually were, but I lived in San Francisco at this time, by the way. So I got to be right there in the center of the hub. San Francisco, LA, and New York were the 2 centers of AIDS back in those days. And so, like I said, the CDC understood in early 1982 that it was drug use. But then there was the April 23rd, 1984 press conference called by Margaret Heckler. He was the Secretary of Health and Human Services at the time, under I couldn't think of his name now. The actor, what was his name? The movie actor. I can't think of it. Anyway, and he was about to end his first term in office, and he had not spoken a word about the AIDS epidemic. The first 4 years of his term in office, he had not said a word about AIDS. And he was afraid that the Democrats might make a campaign issue of the AIDS thing. So he had Margaret Heckler come out there on April 23rd, 1984, and hold a press conference where she brought Robert Gallo out, a video interview, and they claimed that he had discovered the probable cause of AIDS. It was one of his viruses, so-called retrovirus. And he had discovered more or less, they say, two previous ones, and he called in HTLV1 and HTLV2. And this third one they claimed caused AIDS was HTLV3, which was later renamed as HIV, which everybody's familiar with, for human immunodeficiency virus. Now, on that day, April 23rd, 1984, AIDS became contagious, sexually transmitted, caused by a virus, and was inevitably fatal and started in Africa. And that is still AIDS dogma to this day, and not a word of that was true. But the whole purpose of that interview was to take AIDS away from the Democrats during the campaign year of 1984, and it worked successfully. Unfortunately, in November of that year, Anthony Fauci was hired and put in charge of the NIAID, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. And his job was to convert non-infectious diseases into infectious diseases. And his job was initially to turn drug diseases called AIDS into contagious disease. And that Robert Gallow's retrovirus, was supposed to cause. I'll let you ask the question.
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing I saw you on was guinea pig kids. And that was a BBC documentary, which they quickly removed. And they had another one in the UK called AZT, A Cause for Concern. And that featured Peter Duesberg on. And again, that was removed from the official Channel 4. Yeah, I mean, I found it fascinating that at that time they were taking, in the 1990s and early thousands, they were taking away kids from mothers that were testing positive for HIV. Well, I suppose we can get into a bit of the PCR testing and that kind of thing.
Man, it's a tree with 1,000 limbs. We've had 40 years of this scam, this fraud. And the HIV led to the SARS, the MERS, the Zika, the Ebola. All of those are bogus. Absolutely one. And of course, the ultimate scam and hoax, fraud, criminal thing that Fauci did was create a disease out of the blue called COVID-19. And it was caused by another virus, which nobody has. Nobody had HIV either, by the way. I can get into those details later if you want. And so that's why, I've been involved in this thing from the absolute very beginning, all these decades. And I had knew a lot of these people personally from the very beginning. John Rappaport, a journalist, Celia Farber, journalist back in the 80s, they were writing about this stuff. Of course, Peter Duesberg at UC Berkeley, who I worked with on cancer and this AIDS for a number of years, and all the other people. And and I was also a member of President Thabo Mbeki's AIDS advisory panel back in 2000. And this stuff has been going on for decades. It was out there for everybody to see, but it was totally squashed, completely squashed. And if you want to, I can get into what I witnessed back in the 80s. I had my red pill moment or light bulb moment, whatever you want to call it, in 1986. Well, you can go there now if you want.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fascinating period of history. From independent research I've been doing, the United States released the National Security Memorandum 200 in 1974, which was the Kissinger Report. And in that, they detailed how they wanted depopulation was going to be Americans a national security issue. In that document, they talk about how growing populations would basically put pressure on the United States puppet states that would they'd overthrow their governments. And so it's an interesting one from my angle, because AIDS made everyone scared of essentially having sex with each other and reproducing. And but yeah, feel free to go through.
It's very interesting. I didn't know that aspect of it. Yeah, but it all fits together in here. So I'll just tell you, I was this guy that has pharmaceutical company experience. I'm a chemist, and I made these inhibitors for enzymes that were responsible for tissue destruction. And I was just a very mechanical type of guy when you think about it like that. I wasn't really thinking in terms of cause of this disease, cause of that disease. My thing was to make drugs and enzyme inhibitors to treat these things. And there in the 1980s, we had a really good group. We met, I think, once a month, the Bay Area Peptide Group. And we would get together and talk about, somebody give a presentation about what was going on. But then in their world, and then afterward, we go to this Chinese restaurant, usually always the same way, Chinese restaurant after that. And that's why I really went, because that's where we got to sit around these big tables and talk to each other, share our experiences, which was very interesting because a lot of it, that's such varied experiences, and set up the occasional collaboration. And so we got to know each other over a period of years. And it was a lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then after 1984, April 23rd, 1984, I thought, okay, good. Retrovirus is causing, according to that Margaret Heckler interview with Robert Gallo, is a retrovirus. And retroviruses have proteases, metalloproteases. That was my wheelhouse there, or the proteases. And I asked somebody what kind of protease retroviruses had. They said the metalloprotease. And so I started designing inhibitors for the HIV protease within a couple of weeks after that press conference. And but I dropped it really, really quickly. I didn't even synthesize the first one. I was planning out which one to make when I gave up on it, because like I say, I worked at Abbott Laboratories for a couple of years, and I knew a lot of their chemists had been making these inhibitors for some time. And I only had like three or four chemists at the time, as I recall. And they had, I did 20 working on these with the funnel metal starting to lose it here a little bit. Anyway, the HIV protease. And so I was going to, like I say, synthesize these inhibitors. But I realized Abbott had a team of making these kinds of inhibitors for a long time. And so I gave up doing that. There's no way I could compete with them. And I thought they probably already had 2,000 of these inhibitors in bottles on the shelf by the time, by 1984. And in the early 90s, I met an Abbott guy, chemist, at a Gordon Research Conference. And I asked him, I said, how many of these, I think it's a spoil protease of metal, I can't remember now, but it's the HIV protease inhibitor, did you guys have in 1984? He said 3,000. I underestimated by 1,000. They already had 3,000 molecules to inhibit these HIV protease type of enzyme with their inhibitor. And in fact, Abbott was the very first company to come out with the HIV protease inhibitor. So it was so anyway, that's just a little side story of how I got mixed in with these guys. So I was sort of through 1985, I accepted what the government told us, what we're doing. It's a viral disease caused by the HIV. And but then by 1986, I'd been looking, talking to people, looking at the who's getting AIDS, what their diseases are, and they made it clearly not an infectious disease. There's no way that a virus knows whether you're gay or straight, rich or poor, white or black, or what zip code you live in, except for HIV. It knew the Castro district. That's Castro district in San Francisco. That's where the gay guys were that had AIDS, but not across the street, for years. And hemophiliacs would have their spectrum of AIDS diseases. That drug users would have theirs, and different people have these diseases. And it was not contagious, not transmissible. All right. So in 1986, I brought this point up at one of those little meetings that we had once a month, the Bay Area Peptide Group. And I told them, I said, AIDS does not look like it's a contagious disease, that it's spreading anywhere. And nobody wanted to talk. And you hear me, I'm a scientist. We love to talk. We love to tell people our story, do what we do. And so do those guys too. So then it was very strange that they wouldn't talk to me. And then when I met them at UC San Francisco, UC Berkeley, these other places, they still would not talk. And so that was my light bulb moment. I said, something is really, really weird going on here. Because normally they would get into a discussion, an argument, the pros and cons of this and that, and they wouldn't do it. They just would not talk. And there was this one fellow that we had a very good, productive collaboration on parasites. And where I made the inhibitors, and he would try them on the parasites, and it worked great. And in order to keep our collaboration going, we agreed not to talk about AIDS from what I was learned about it, from just my observation. And from that point on, I became extremely suspicious of the whole thing. I knew something not right. not right. Turned out to be totally crooked. But I didn't know that then.
So you reckon they were getting big wads of cash back then?
No, I don't think let me tell you, I'll tell you how I think it was the progression. I don't think people were getting money. It was too early. These people were not getting money but for the AIDS thing, purely in these days. But they were getting government money. Correct. This is the key. Virtually all academic researchers get either pharmaceutical money to do their research. Of course, that's biased because they want you to work on what they're interested in, and the government. That's basically it. And so I worked in areas that were not politically significant. Like AIDS was politically significant. Arthritis was not. Cancer was not in those days. And but a lot of the people knew see, I was independent, had my own little company. I didn't have to write grant proposals. I had my company generate its own money through sales and things. But these people required grant support. I didn't know this instantly. I only realized it later. But I realized that something was seriously wrong. That these people, good people, all of a sudden would not talk about a specific issue. And to me, that would be very, very serious. Something very bad and deep was going on. And then I have been studying this AIDS thing ever since that time, for 4 decades now. And all of the other things that were going on during that period. But that's what I learned with AIDS, how crooked it was. And my friend, Professor Peter Duesberg at UC Berkeley, when I went over there and worked with him, he was one of the original people on retroviruses. HIV is retrovirus. He was the one that sequenced the first one to sequence the genome of retroviruses. And, he knew more about these things than anybody in the world. And yet in 1986, he was wrote an article, I think it was Cancer Research, and he was challenging the HIV hypothesis that this retrovirus is causing AIDS. The world's leading authority on retroviruses would criticize and challenging point for point using evidence, documented evidence, how it could not be true. And then that got published. You see, that was in the early days of something like that could get published. Later on, he couldn't get anything published out of it. But there in the 80s, he could. And you see, and the thing is that many of the people in academia understood that already before AIDS. They already understood that you cannot challenge their funding. So I'll take a breath and let you see where you want to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, because it brings us, because AIDS, I mean, I didn't know any of this prior to COVID. It was RFK Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci, where it had about 400 pages to the HIV kind of debate that had largely been erased from history. And from there, I've been going a bit down that rabbit hole and seeing just how totally corrupt science is. I mean, you've talked about this before in your article, Tyranny of Dogma, and I thought that was a great article to show just how corrupt science is.
Well, I think the institutions are totally dead. They're rotten to the core, and they're not fixable. Too big, it's gone on too long. It's kind of hopeless right now. And all you got to do, that's the thing of it. It was really rotten to the core in the 80s, and I didn't know it because I didn't personally experience, and I didn't know individuals who had personally, because it was creeping up in those days, where the giant claws of money that controls everything is coming in. But they didn't have everything controlled in me. Those days. They do now. It's totally under control, controlled by the government and the pharmaceutical and all the money, and so I don't know where to go with that. I mean, it's just a mess. It's not fixable.
Yeah, me and a colleague released a documentary this year called Unseen, and it follows some of the death protocols that were implemented during COVID in Britain. And they essentially were giving patients remdesivir for COVID. I mean, it's very similar to the AZT thing where they'd given this toxic poison drug to the gays and the gay community. And here they were doing it to elderly. They were giving them like remdesivir. They were putting them on ventilators. They were forging do not resuscitate orders. And it's all kind of come out because we've got a UK COVID inquiry and a Scottish COVID inquiry that is currently running. it's completely blacked out in the media. But if you follow those and see like the testimonies coming through, it's just absolutely shocking. But yeah, I mean, it's just incredible that Anthony Fauci, well, the same sort of group of people, created these pandemics from whole cloth. So yeah, I guess we could go to how Gallo came out and declared there was HIV and AIDS.
Well, the Gallo thing is sort of interesting. Again, Peter Duesberg knew Gallo because Gallo worked on retrovirus. And Peter was the leader in retrovirus. And they knew each other. And Gallo had his HTLV1, human T-cell leukemia virus 1, he had HTLV2, human leukemia virus 2, which he claimed were causing cancer. That wasn't true. It never happened. But they were retroviruses. And so he had his HTLV3. He came out with that, and that's an interesting story. Luc Montagnier, he got in Paris, he got the Nobel Prize in the early 2000s, not for proving that HIV caused AIDS, but for discovering HIV. And what he did, he had tissue samples of AIDS patients in France, and he could not purify. He didn't have the capability of purifying what was causing the tissue destruction in these AIDS patients. So he sent a human tissue sample to Robert Gallo, because Robert Gallo was able to isolate viruses from tissue sample. And Robert Gallo did. He took Luc Montagnier's sample, and initially he could not find any viruses in it at all. So what he did was he used the same techniques that he did to generate HTLV1 and HTLV2, his other retroviruses, where basically what he did was he takes these cells and he can't get any viruses out of them, these cultured cells, and he really stresses the dickens out of them, physically and chemically, and I guess entomologically, and stresses these things to the point where they can start falling apart, and they release these little particles. And they look like viral particles. We know now they're exosomes. They call exosomes, which are normal things, but they're all over. They look like viral particles. The sizes are all pretty much the same. What they look with under electron microscope, they look the same. But they do not cause any disease at all. And he did the same thing with Luc Montagnier's tissue. He could not find any virus, so he applied the same techniques, these really stressful things, to cell culture. And he forced out these little exosomes from Luc Montagnier's sample. And he called the new little particles HTLV3, his third in a series of human retroviruses, later to be called HIV. And he did not attribute the fact that he got the sample from Luc Montagnier, big court battles and everything going on about that. And eventually, Robert Gallo, I think it was November of 1989 or something like that, where Robert Gallo was convicted of scientific misconduct from lying about his discovery of HTLV3, same thing as HIV. And eventually he was quietly relieved or put out of the NIH, but put in a larger company, so he wouldn't totally disappear, but he was no longer in the news, no longer in the media, no longer part of the government. They just got rid of him really, really quick to keep him silent. And then that's why Luc Montagnier eventually got the Nobel Prize, because they found out he got the thing that Robert Gallo was dealing with was from Luc Montagnier. So you can see very early on, it was very crooked what was going on. They had the Anthony Fauci and the government of the United States absolutely had to have AIDS, a contagious, sexually transmitted, lethal disease, of which anybody and everybody is susceptible. And they'd use that same principle. Anthony Fauci, 4 decades at the NIAID, he used that same exact principle for the host of others, 7 or 8 other phony, bogus viral diseases that doesn't exist. Ultimately, with the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2, the CDC even acknowledges in their own documents that they do not have an authentic sample of either HIV for the HIV test, all the way down to the SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. In their own documents, the CDC says that there's no authentic record sample to verify their test all the way through. I've got all that stuff on my website. So I'll shut up and let us continue which way you want to go.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of lawyers at the minute on TikTok, and they're getting quite a lot of clients because if you drink a can of Monster, you can register as over the limit on driving. So you could effectively lose your license if you have a can of Monster and then get pulled over. That's that energy drink. Why aren't they doing that for the PCR test? I mean, you've got a pathogen that doesn't exist for a faulty PCR test that doesn't work, that lost how many people's jobs, destroyed how many livelihoods, how many businesses, you know. So, yeah.
Well, your question, well, why are they allowed to do that? Your question, I think the answer is pretty obvious right now. Because all the institutions are corrupt. The legal institution, the government institutions, in the United States, the CDC, the NIH, our federal government, they're all rotten to the core, and they can't do anything. They can't fix it. Money is the weapon here. It is the global poison. A huge concentration of wealth is the poison that is destroying the world right now. It shuts things down. It creates all these pressures on people. They shut them up because where's the money come from? I mean, these people buy them all off, And these people are not bad. The ones at UCSF and UC Berkeley, the scientists, the researchers, the academics, most of them were not bad people. They really were committed to do the research, but they knew the game. That's what they even said about poor Peter Duesberg when he got this funding shut down. They said Peter didn't know how to play the game, which meant keep your mouth shut on certain things where the funders don't want you to talk about. But Peter's not that kind of guy. But the other people, who were there a lot younger and their careers were on there, and they just think of it this way: all professional, most professional, especially spent decades of their life, lots and lots of money to build a career, and then they find out that the whole process is corrupt and criminal, but they're hooked. What are they going to do? How are they going to get out of it in any way easily? There's a fellow, Jeff Schmidt, Disciplined Mind. Jeff Schmidt is a great book. I read that when it first came out. And it tells about how all these very highly educated professionals, what they go through. And the subtitle of his book, which I don't remember, basically tells the whole thing about the story of what academics go through, the people either through college as undergraduate to graduate to, and then all the way when they become professors or try to become academic people like that. Yeah, they're basically in a box that they cannot escape if they want to keep their profession going.
Yeah, it's definitely very corrupt. I mean, I got looking into the climate change stuff after Extinction Rebellion became quite popular after the IPCC report. And then I went down the whole rabbit hole of how the IPCC was created. And yeah, it's just corruption after corruption after corruption. Yeah, I'll definitely have a look into that. So by the 1990s, they were given a toxic drug, AZT, to all these, mostly the gay community, but they were doing it to anyone that tested positive for a HIV test. So has there been any sort of recrimination for the people that have been that took a positive HIV test and had their lives effectively ruined?
Well, it's only gotten worse, believe it or not. Sits there. We spent, God, I don't know, probably close. When I say we spent, I don't mean government. I mean the pharmaceutical amount of money that they have made and all that, at least $1 trillion on AIDS alone, and the drug and the test and everything. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, none of the HIV tests, first of all, even test for HIV itself, because there's no HIV, which they say in the inserts that come with all of the tests that there's no HIV, but we're talking about AIDS, there was no HIV a sample available to confirm the whether or not the results were true positive, false positive, whatever. It says it right in the package insert. A lot of the court cases that we won about in the United States here, they had felony laws against people. I think 48 states or something like that. The felony laws, if you expose somebody to HIV without telling them, that's a felony in most states in the United States. And we won 55 cases though, by not even having to go to court, just showing the package insert, and they were dropped to charge it on the. And we had one case that was in the military. I think it was in the Air Force. I think it was the Air Force for the case where we lost the case because they had the same thing, but it went all the way. They took it up to higher court, and so the second highest court in the land was which was in the U.S. military court, and the next highest was Supreme Court. And they overturned the conviction of this guy based on the fact that the tests for HIV are totally bogus. And the United States, I remember when that was released, when that happened, I thought, man, that should be at all the news reports all over the country, all over the world. Not a single peep in the media of the United States. When the military, the people in the U.S. military are the only ones who cannot be charged with a felony for exposing somebody to HIV if you're antibody positive. Only the military. If you're a civilian, it doesn't work for you. I mean, that's a huge, huge story, you know? And of course, it's total silence. I know I'm falling off these branches off this tree with 1,000 limbs. Sort of diverted from what the question originally asked.
No, feel free, but go wherever you like. It's it's get to you talk.
It's hard. It's 40-year journey. And when I start thinking about these things, which way it goes here and which way it goes there, and like, the test, now for some reason, I think I know the reason. Now I've never owned a television, so I don't follow that sort of thing. But I all of a sudden, people are asking me to talk about AIDS. You're one of them. And the people at Children's Health Defense were asking me to do that, and other people asking me to do it. All of a sudden, it got heated up again, and I guess because I think they're starting in the United States, they're starting to talk about HIV positive people again.
Our Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he took a HIV test in earlier this year. I think it was January, but I'm not sure. But earlier this year, he took a HIV test. And it was a big thing. He invited all the media. It was like a front page news for a couple of days in Britain, at least. And he was like, everyone should get an HIV test. And obviously, if people do that, they could have their lives ruined for absolutely nothing.
The beauty of it is that had it not been for COVID, this wouldn't be new because the COVID thing is waking up enough people, to be suspicious about it. And also there's these alternative people like you and other folks that contact me to talk about this stuff. That's one way I get to know what's going on in the world. So when people start calling, talk about cancer, talk about AIDS, there must be something going on out there about cancer. Turbo cancer. I learned about turbo cancer. And so here I am going up one of those limbs again. But it's totally bogus. All this stuff is bogus, and they're trying to push it. Like I said, the pharmaceutical industry, I think they own 86%, I think, of the financing for the FDA and for the CDC. I think comes from the pharmaceutical companies. The latest number I saw was 86%. It used to be public government funding, and it started out this way decades ago, but it just keeps going up. So virtually everything, all the institutions in our government in the United States are funded by corporate entity, extremely powerful corporate entity. It has nothing to do with tax dollars, And of course, people fall in line and they do these things and promote it. And now with Kennedy in office, he wants to, President Kennedy in the United States, Secretary Kennedy here in the United States, and he wants to look into the stuff and shut down a lot of this stuff, and rightly so. It's very, very dangerous. These injections, the so-called vaccine, and so they're really fighting back now. They're trying to attack him, and they want to bring up more things like AIDS. Now AIDS is back. Let's go back for that. And get our hundreds of billions of dollars off of the drug Domisa. This is a story I got to tell you about the HIV drugs, because it is an interesting story. You talked about AZT. There's some odd 30 some odd AIDS drugs out there. I think 3 or 4 nucleoside analogs. That's like the AZT. AZT was so toxic. It was invented back in the 1950s. As a cancer chemotherapy. It's so toxic that the guy who invented it didn't even patent it. And Anthony Fauci turned it into an AIDS drug. He all it along, nurtured it along, and he killed an awful lot of guys giving these people AZT. The bottle that AZT, as you find that if you're a chemist or academic or a drug company, you got a bottle, order it from a chemical company. It comes with skull and crossbones, a warning label on there. If it tells you all the things you need to do if you have the symptoms or if you become exposed to it, all this kind of stuff, But it's a nice pleasant little blue bottle with a blue label if you're an AIDS patient and you get the AZT, and and you, it's still, I have no idea how many people AZT is killed, but AZT, DDIT3, D4T, and these other ones, they were very toxic too. And then they followed it up with the protease inhibitor. And then, okay, all fine and good. Now, AIDS peaked early on, I think around like 1992 or something like that. And it's like been going down every time. But yet you had this big industries that make a huge amount of money on these AIDS drugs and AIDS tests. So they keep pumping out these drugs, keep pumping them out, new ones all the time. And to keep the AIDS drug thing going, they invented a new disease, IRS, immune reconstitution syndrome. And they had a thing, I'll get into in a moment, they had what's called post prophylactic therapy and pre therapy for in case you're exposed to HIV. If you're a gay guy, you can take some of these anti-HIV drugs, pre-exposure prophylactic, to help you prevent getting infected with HIV. But let's say you're a healthcare worker and you got a little HIV positive blood on you, or you don't know it's down in the history. You can take what's called post-exposure prophylaxis, and they're the same HIV drug, all right? And they're doing this for a number of years, and unfortunately, a lot of people that were taking these drugs started coming down with AIDS-defining diseases, plus a whole host of other diseases. And instead of calling it drug toxicity or whatever, or anything like that, they had to come up with a new name, and they call it immune reconstitution syndrome. And they first started this with a gay guy, because they're giving the gay guys these drugs who were not really hurting too much, and they didn't have any AIDS symptoms or anything. But then they started taking these things prophylactically, and then they started getting sick with all kinds of diseases, including AIDS-defining disease. But these diseases that these gay guys were getting after taking these drugs, which were many of them were AIDS-defining, they didn't call it AIDS. They called it post prophylactic immune reconstitution syndrome. Which
Essentially all the same symptoms, and that could be.
You had the same symptoms, and then you get really, really sick, and they don't call it AIDS. They don't even call it toxicity. They call it immune reconstitution. It was a sign. They even have it spelled out literally. It's a sign that your immune system is coming back to life. And it killed, I don't know how many people it killed with IRS, immune reconstitution. And the same thing with post-exposure prophylaxis, like healthcare workers. They don't have anything wrong with them at all. They just have a little blood spilt on them, and they're a little nervous, and then they take some of these things, and then they can come down with these IRS things and get sick. And the number of diseases, there was like 30 some odd AIDS defining. Now the total of these post-exposure prophylaxis or IRS diseases plus the AIDS diseases are huge, and it just keeps growing. I mean, these drugs are causing more and more harm, making more and more diseases, more and more symptoms. But yet they just keep plowing it around and keep pushing it, and I know this sounds surreal. I got all the documentation. I got it on my website. People can go there and look this stuff up. It will blow your mind.
Absolutely. So what was your thoughts when they started kicking the COVID stuff into gear then?
Again, you mean? I think IRS is the third time where they started pumping out these drugs again. But with the, with the COVID thing, they're trying to make a new one come back, as I understand. They want to have another pandemic this fall.
Yeah, the British government's currently running Operation Pegasus, which is a pandemic preparation exercise. And it's quite similar to the Event 201 that happened right before COVID.
Right. Well, I mean, I hope people are smart enough now to smell a rat. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, that sort of thing. And I just hope enough people say, no, man, it can't be here. Unfortunately, there's a huge fraction of the population right now. They're so emotionally traumatized and brain dead because of the past 5 years with this COVID stuff and what's happened to their families and friends, to themselves. And is that the people are splitting apart. You have the people who are still mentally okay, and then you have those who aren't. Um, and I don't know. I, there's a lot of pushback right now. Thank goodness. I just wish I could see more of it. Uh, I'm afraid we're going to lose a lot more people in the near future than we have in the past.
So, what do you think I mean, obviously they ran that mass vaccination campaign after, the absurdities of COVID-19. Like it was in April 2020 that the British government said that COVID-19 wasn't a highly infectious disease and it didn't need that much. And then like a week later, they rolled out the lockdown. So what do you think the vaccines are about? Was it purely a money-making exercise or?
No, it's a weapon. Absolutely. Sure, they make money and everything. They're really, literally, and this is the game plan. They're really trying to reduce the global population. They're open about this for decades. I mean, nobody's made an issue. It's like what I've been doing has been open for decades, fighting the AIDS onionness, but people don't know about it because it's not publicized, you see. And the other thing is that the bad guys can be very open about what they want to do because they control all the media. It's not going to get published, It's really a population reduction program globally, the global population program. It's criminal. It's murder. I have no qualms at all. I'll go in the courtroom and swear to that. And I can prove it with the evidence, their own doctor.
Is that for the vaccines, is it?
Yes, but not just the vaccine. It's the whole setup. I mean, it's an omnivore, which means they're using every weapon they can think of. They're using injection. They're putting poisons in the atmosphere, in the water, in the food, trying to starve people to death, kill all the animal, chickens and cows and ostriches. Some places they're trying to kill. I mean, it's a how do you kill billions of people? You can't use one weapon. You have to use a whole bunch of weapons. And that the injections are pushing it. I forget how many billions of people have been injected with the SARS-CoV-2 stuff. And then I forget how many hundreds of different kinds of lots. And they're probably putting and changing things all the time. And I've been following that stuff. I mean, cancer is really, really a big problem for me to inject on top of all the other things like heart problems, neurological problems. People are still dropping dead like flies all across the United States. When I moved here to we moved here to North Carolina in 2017. We might hear a siren once or twice a month. Now we hear about 10 a day, and have been since 20. Well, we were hearing about 7 a day in 2021, 2022, but now it's stable at around 10 a day. Sirens every day, instead of 1 or 2 a month. And so the population is shrinking. It is shrinking, and that's cyber's own.
Yeah, I put out a tweet the other day with the ONS, which is the Office for National Statistics, and in September 2020, there were less excess deaths as in September 2025. So people are dropping like flies. And they even had the SP40 reappear in the Pfizer vaccine.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, a lot of that stuff. I've done a lot of research. I know a lot about. Let me give myself a little bit of water here. I know a lot about those things. SP40 is the most potent carcinogen known in cell culture and in animals, laboratory animals that have no immune system, but they do not cause cancer. SP40 does not cause cancer in humans or animals that are normal, only in laboratory. But in the laboratory and in these animals that don't have an immune system, they are the most potent carcinogen known. That you see, there's hundreds of thousands of different carcinogens out there. Just the light that comes from the sun, X-rays are carcinogen, and the pharmaceutical drugs. A lot of this, most chemotherapy for cancer is carcinogen, and so we got hundreds, maybe thousands of carcinogens coming all the time. And SP40 is in the injector. There's no doubt about that, and also spike protein. But I don't think SP40 is causing cancer, as long as somebody has an immune system. Plus, even if it is, I think it is a carcinogen. I think SP40 is definitely carcinogen. But the thing of it is that carcinogen, they started, but it takes years for blood cancers in humans, up to decades or solid tumor in human beings, decades to develop after surgery occurred. So I don't think this thing called turbo cancer, which has been known since 2017, but they called it hyperprogressive disease. I'll get to that in one will be. But with these injections, they're seeing these rapid cancers in young people. I mean, stage 3, stage 4, and they die in days, weeks, and months, generally in less than a year. This is unheard of. And you cannot, in my opinion, as a cancer expert, I cannot pin that on SB40 to cause it. I think what is happening with these turbo cancers is that we all have cancers in us, tumors in us. We just don't know it. They're there, and our body deals with it, and they go away, or they stay dormant. But if you depress your immune system significantly, like these drugs do, and they even know the mechanism how they do it, make known this, that's, I think, that mid-2010s, like 2015, 2017, something like that you can go in and fool around with the immune system and accelerate the dickens out of cancer. And that acceleration is called hyperprogressive disease. And it's not, you see this in people who didn't come in for cancer back in the early days, or with the COVID stuff. They didn't have cancer that you knew of. They were healthy, but they had these injections. And here they are dying of cancer really fast. My hypothesis is, and I think I got some documentation to support it, that what's happening is that that they're destroying what's called the IgG4 system of regulation. Your immune system has an acceleration pedal and a brake pedal. Your acceleration is when you're exposed to a pathogen or an allergen or whatever, your immune system gets activated and it starts doing something about it. And then you have your braking system, when it's over with, to clean up the mess, and don't cause damage to the host. Well, unfortunately, these drugs like anti-cancer agent that they were using back in the mid-2015, from 2010, 17, 20, and still to this day, these so-called immune checkpoint inhibitors, they were destroying the immune system of the cancer patient. And the cancer patient, then their normal tumor explodes, just rapidly progresses, and these people are dead really quick. And the last I looked, there were 283 papers in the scientific literature published on hyperprogressive disease in the literature. And none of them are trying to find out what's causing it. That's the weird thing. They're just relating what they see. And this started with these immune checkpoint inhibitors before COVID. But the same thing is happening with these cats with people that got the COVID injected, that their immune system is shutting down, and the cancers that they had are now popping up really, really fast. These hyperprogressive diseases. It's like these laboratory animals that if you put SC40 in a laboratory animal that has no immune system, he'll develop tumors really, really quick and die, or in cell culture. And basically, I think what is happening with the injections with SARS-CoV-2, and I think this was the conscious thing. I think it was conscious. I think they knew this, that these things were going to disrupt the immune system and shut it down, imbalance it in such a way. This is going to interfere with the braking system, the IgG4 business. So that any cancer you've got in your body is now free to just progress as fast as it wants to and take people out. And that's exactly what's going on. And the numbers are increasing.
Yeah, very disturbing. That's a very similar sort of analysis as Angus Daglish. He's top oncologist in Britain, and he's made sort of similar conclusions. Did you ever work with Khepri Mullis? Because he's a fascinating character as well, isn't he?
No, he did not work with him. He was a friend of mine. Khepri, I both went to Georgia Tech. He was 2 years ahead of me, and I didn't know him in those days. He was 2 years ahead of me. I basically stayed at Georgia Tech, got all my degrees there. He went to California and got a PhD. And then when I moved to California in 1984, Khepri was in California. I didn't know who he was, until the AIDS stuff. I didn't even know Khepri Mullis existed. Peter Duesberg introduced me to Khepri back in the early 90s. And so he was working in the East Bay, and I had my labs there too, but I didn't know him being at all. But we were pretty much, if we'd have known each other, we could have gotten together real easy. And he was the one that invented PCR, polymerase chain reaction, and got the Nobel Prize for it. And he was famous for, he was writing a paper on AIDS and about HIV, the probable cause of AIDS. And he wanted a reference, a citation, for who made that discovery or made those claims or who said it. He couldn't find anything. He tried for a number of years. He was starting to get very suspicious because normally, anything that's really big, the author, the people behind it. It's either self-promoting or other people promote it or whatever, You can always, if something a big item, you'll always be able to track down, even if they don't want to be tracked down, who's behind it. And he couldn't find it. And finally, one day he met Luc Montagnier, the guy, and asked Luc Montagnier, who discovered HIV. And Luc Montagnier, he didn't know. So then old Khepri got really upset. I don't blame him after that. And he was pretty convinced that it was a whole boat of fraud and everything. And and he wrote the introduction to one of Peter's books, I think, Inventing the AIDS Virus. And it's a good introduction. Peter's book is great. People can go to my website, davidrasnick.com. You can download the whole thing. It's a PDF among a whole host of other things if you want. And I got to meet Khepri at Peter's lab back in the 90s. And we got to be buddies. And we met up and did things other parts of the world like Colombia, South America. We met there at a big conference down there and did some hiking around and traveling and things. So I knew him, and I knew his wife a little bit. And he was a great guy. He's a Southerner. He was in South Carolina. I was in Georgia. And and then he died recently, right before, I think, 2019. 3 of the world's most credentialed, outspoken critics of Anthony Fauci, 2 of them are dead. One of them had a stroke really, really quick, either just before or just after this COVID scam started.
Okay, what were the other 2's names?
Well, it was Luc Montagnier. He died. He was the Nobel laureate. And Peter Duesberg had a stroke. He could have died, but he didn't. And he's the world. So you have Khepri Mullis, a Nobel laureate, Luc Montagnier, a Nobel laureate, and Peter Duesberg, the world's leading authority on retroviruses, was a member of the National Academy of Sciences. These were his 3 biggest outspoken credential people criticizing Anthony Fauci. And so if these people were, look, if you're going to go to the trouble to try to kill billions of people on the world, why would you leave these 3 people, the most credentialed, outspoken critics of Anthony Fauci? Why would you leave them out there where they could go after Anthony Fauci and make the news and try to shut down this COVID? Now, I'm saying that, but I'm not saying I know that for a fact. I don't, but I would bet heavily on if they wanted to kill billions of people, why wouldn't they kill 3 or try to kill 3? They ain't get Peter, Khepri Mullis died, I think it was November 2019 or something like that, right before the COVID thing. Luc Montagnier, I think the year into or something like that, and Peter Duesberg had his stroke. And so, what are the odds that that's going to happen to these people?
Yeah, I thought the same when I looked up Khepri Mullis's death, and it was right before COVID-19, and especially because in his previous interviews, he was a right firebrand against Anthony Fauci, saying he doesn't know nothing about science and all this stuff. So, yeah, if they're going to inflict that upon the world, then those are the people you definitely target. Did you ever see the British Medical Journal come up with that article about the African leaders that all died that rejected the vaccines?
I heard about it early on, not just that, but, right after it happened. Africa. Yeah, it was a shocker with Southern Africa, basically, mostly, the ones, and they all died one after the other, man. And I follow a lot of stuff that goes on in Africa, so I guess within a week or so, I heard these stories, and it's no coincidence. That's all I can say. It's no coincidence. I have no evidence other than look what happened. It's like with Khepri, Luc Montagnier, and Peter Duesberg. I have no personal evidence that I can take into court. And then these other people, these heads of state in Southern Africa, there's no evidence there. But what are the odds? But these people were outspoken. They wanted to be independent. That was the hallmark of the people that died. They wanted to make their own decisions for their country, and that could not be allowed to happen. And I'll tell you from the AIDS thing, why it was, because especially here in the United States, we, people are nothing in the outside the United States other than what the mainstream media, which means powers that be, want you to know about, are they aware of. But the independence in Africa, down there, in Southern Africa especially, there's no interest, and completely kept from the people of the United States. What's going on down there? And they basically have no interest in it. And for a long history, it's like, oh, it's Africa. Nothing's going on down there or anything. So you can get away with just about anything. That's why many of the AIDS studies and the Anthony Fauci, all of his weird diseases, not just AIDS, but Ebola, Zika, the first SARS, and these other things, are all funny, but most of them were not in the United States. Like Ebola was in Africa. I actually studied the Ebola thing, and I looked at it, and it was in, what's that, the country, the Congo. It was in the Congo, and it had like a little revolution going on. They have revolutions going on there all the time. And they have these gold mines. Congo, it was very rich in minerals. And I was looking up the history and everything I could find publication about Ebola and the first people that got it. It was in these mines in the Congo, and there was these wars going on and things, and some of the combatants, some of the gold mines were shut down, but they were still there. And people would go down into the mines, curiosity, right? Go down in the mines, some of these guys would. And then they would come out, and then they would die suddenly. The people that didn't go down in the mines that have these diseases and didn't die. But then they took these deaths of these guys that died in the mines and attributed it to infectious agent, Ebola. At least I think the people that did that, I think, was Anthony Fauci, or the U.S. government made a story out of it. They didn't kill these people. These people died, and they were in the Congo. Oh, how convenient. They're far away. Americans up here. And they blamed it on, Anthony Fauci blamed it on a virus, Ebola, and he did that with Zika and all these other things. And the thing of it is that it's so easy. The literature is there. All you got to do is look it up, and you see how absurd it is. There was no such thing as Ebola virus,
And they used what's ironic about that is they then used remdesivir to test on the people in the Congo, and it had something like a 54% kill rate of the trials. And then they used remdesivir for the COVID pandemic as well to treat so-called COVID-19.
I can do it because it's away from the media. It's away from public notice. And the only public notice they give a damn about in the United States are the people in the United States, And so they can get away with anything in Africa.
Yeah, India too. I know they were doing the HPV vaccine trials there. And for the HPV vaccine, the HPV vaccine was essentially trying to stop a cancer that wouldn't appear in women until their mid-50s. And they still managed to kill a bunch of children for the HPV vaccine trials.
What about human papillomavirus? That one? Yeah. Let's tell you about this. Yeah, I know that very well. And India, though, is different from Africa. The people in India, by and large, are much better educated, and they are more aware about what's going on, and it's more centralized. Where Africa, all these little countries, and there. So I think Indians are going to wake up a lot quicker than other folks.
Excellent, David. I've kept you about 60 minutes now. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you on. Have you got any book recommendations or that kind of thing for people to study up on more?
I would just go to my website. I got 40 years worth of stuff on it. It's my name, David Rasnick, DavidRasnick. There's no space between name.com. Books you can download, references, papers. I try to keep it up to date. If anything dies, I can't get it. I try to take it off so that doesn't get too cluttered with junks. But a lot of stuff on there, free things, videos, tons of videos, books that you can download, papers you can get, graphs that you can look at. And I encourage people to do it because you get the data. Don't take my word for anything. Go dig into it and do your own research. Go wherever you want to and find out for yourself.
Excellent. Thank you, David.